Okay, I'm back on the air today again for my second video, and I've got this. I've been saving this for you, and I don't like reading at all because it bores people. And every time I tried to plan my radio shows, they fell on their face. It just fell flat. When I flew by the seat of my pants, people loved it. So I'm going to read this because I want to make sure to get it right, and I know that. But this is all we're going to cover in the second part of today's video. This is from ForbiddenKnowledgeTV.net, and this is 157923-2, September 23rd, famous day in my family's life. I'm going to read this, and I'm going to try my best not to comment on this. James Grundvig of Unrestricted Warfare, which is what we are in today, unrestricted warfare. The enemy knows who they are, they know who we are, and they're fighting us, but we don't know who they are, and we certainly don't know who we are. James Grundvig of Unrestricted Warfare is back with a secret guest who we'll call ex-Marine, a common law expert in the financial industry, to talk about his crazy backstory where the U.S. government got the $3 trillion to bail out the 2008 global financial meltdown, and to talk about how, when you get down to the brass tacks of our legal and financial systems, money is tangible assets and labor. It is not currency. Currency is a debt, and that's what uh, the guy from Georgetown University, Carol Quigley, published in his book that was twisting my mind up, because I'm thinking that's not a debt, it's, but that's what they have us doing. They have us arguing and fighting over debt. Ex-Marine maintains that the U.S.'s $37 trillion debt is not money. It's currency, and they're getting ready to do a reset on the currency. They've racked up all this currency, and they went out and they bought tangible assets with it. He says they took our future labor and they inflated it. The 2008 meltdown was caused by a real estate bubble driven by predatory lending for subprime mortgages, as well as by mortgage-backed securities, MBS, linked to a vast web of derivatives that had collapsed in value. So everything was about to go under. I'm not going to do the rest of this. Starting September 15th, 2008, Lehman Brothers, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, and Bank of America all went under within a 48-hour period. By Wednesday the 17th, the AIG was about to go under. Then between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. on Thursday morning, President George Bush and Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson injected $120 billion of liquidity to stop the entire financial system from freezing up and going into collapse, which would have been the end of many American corporations and the start of bread lines 1,000 times longer than those of the 1930s Great Depression. We now learn that James' secret guest, ex-Marine, how that $3 trillion was found by Paulson and Bush, which they used to save the economy, and how this stash foiled this previous attempt by the globalists to crash the global economy, because they said in 1865 they would pull out the rug at a time of their own choosing, one rabbi eulogizing another rabbi over his grave at his funeral, when they were burying him in Russia in 1864, if I remember, according to Tex Mars. So they were going to bring forth Soviet-style gulag FEMA camps and all kinds of things that we saw taking shape during the COVID hoax in the Biden administration. So we were saved from that. And so do we actually have a Treasury direct account? Is there a trust in place? He says he figured out the Attorney General is in fact the common law trustee, and that the American population, U.S. citizens, have been converted many decades previously, into de facto British subjects through the Social Security Treaty and the United States Code, which in his opinion is the largest trust indenture slavery on the planet. So I'm going to skip through this because I don't want to violate them too much. I do recommend you go to ForbiddenKnowledgeTV.net and look this up. So what ended up happening is that They got an entry of default against AG John Ashcroft with the local U.S. attorney claiming he had not served the AG correctly. So anyway, they ended up going and taking all of their pleadings and everything down to the Treasury Department, from what I remember. So, in other words, Claude was given standing by the LA federal judge. He didn't have standing in Phoenix. And what they ended up happening was Claude decided to do a test run. The test run was put in a set of bonds he sent to the White House, not to the Treasury. And the bonds were for the purpose of discharging and offsetting the $60 billion of debt of the African Development Fund. Well, why not, you know? Anyway, ex-Marine explains that the White House and the Treasury and the Annex building are only a few feet from each other. He didn't know whether his friend had switched the 5 to a 6 intentionally, but he says a month later, the White House published on their website, and they sent him a letter. Thank you very much to the private citizen for discharging and offsetting $60 billion of debt for the African Development Fund. Now it's gone from the red to the black. So it worked. And they had printed up these bonds on some damn inkjet printer or whatever. And so they ended up filing. They cranked out $3 trillion in bonds using a brother printing machine, which are all filed into the UCC record. And they redacted some of this, so they published it on the website. Go look at it, please, please. I don't think the lady will mind me pointing you in the direction of her website. And it said, filing the UCC financial statement amendment partially reads, for the purpose of engaging in collection on the $3 trillion discharging an indemnity, bonds originally offered October 12, 2008 to support the credit of the United States government, for which a standard statutory interest rate of 10% in the form of USD per annum is hereby applied for lack of meaningful response by the U.S. Treasury. Furthermore, Mr. Blank, acting as an attorney in fact, is hereby assigned. So he didn't know if they were running into a risk or not, you know, with this thing. And 2 weeks later, Henry Paulson and George W. Bush announced we found $3 trillion we didn't know we had. Their associate, the late Tom Schultz, had arranged for a meeting on December 22nd, 2008 at the Treasury Annex building. And they went there. But at the last minute, Tom Schultz couldn't make it. The meeting was canceled. And they were at the north end and when told if they had anything to file, they were to go to the south end. When they got to the guard gate at the south end, there was a phone. The guard told them to pick up the phone and speak to the operator if they wanted to talk to somebody. So they picked up the phone and 2 mail clerks came out with a trolley to receive their documents. So we got a car on wheels. And he had 2 4-inch binders of documents for clients regarding TDA trust accounts. And Claude had one then file. And one of the clerks asked, anything else, gentlemen? And anyway, the fellow who was involved knew a lot what was going on, and they wanted to know anything. Who are you guys? And they identified themselves. It says, he says, well, I'm the counsel, and this is my client for he and his 2 sons that made the deposits, and we were showing him the documents. I didn't say anything about $3 trillion. For the deposits for these bonds. He goes, you guys made these deposits. And we said, yeah. And he says, that's what's paying our bills right now. Just imagine how much you were worth in that hidden trust fund they have on you. The bonds they printed out of a brother machine were apparently still funding the U.S. government. There's more to this. And he says, I'm going on. Let's see. So we're talking to him at the time at the Treasury Annex, and this fellow says, are you guys here to serve subpoenas on Mr. Paulson? And I'm going, well, no. I go, are you getting a lot of subpoenas? And he says, oh, yeah. He says, we're getting subpoenas left and right to get their piece of the pie, the $3 trillion that was found. And what do you mean the piece of the pie? He says, well, everyone gets to pay off that $3 trillion. And he's the one that brought up the $3 trillion and not me. So people are making claims to the 3 trillion. He goes, all the time. I go, well, we're not here to sue Mr. Paulson. We're here to make sure they're doing all right. And we do have a request for $10 million to cover expenses for my client and his 2 associates for the printing costs and travel. And, all the time it took us to generate all that. And so we came back later to give him that bill, and he said he was relieved that we weren't bringing any subpoenas. And I said, what are you using the funds for? And that's when he said, well, have you ever heard of TARP? So that's where the money for TARP came from, the Troubled Asset Relief Program. All I can say is that they have screwed us over. And all of that debt on that chart that they have is money that they owe us. They've robbed us. And now they're going to do a reset, a currency reset, and we dumbass Americans are going to go right along with it because we think it's going to give us relief. But the truth is it's going to further enslave us. So do yourself to educate yourself, become more knowledgeable than I am, and start using your knowledge and taking action, because you can take yourself out of the slave system before they crash it and before they enslave us again. And this next slavery, by the way, they're going to round us up. That's what they want to do. They're going to set up an industrialized killing machine. You don't believe me? How deep is the blood going to be in the River Jordan? Go read that in the Bible. How many human beings killed and blood drain, sacrifice, does it take to fill up the Jordan to the level described in the Bible? Well, that jackass who thought he was so good that intimidated the rest of us told us he did the calculations. He took the average quart volume of blood a human has. He took the average height of a horse's stadia, and he took the floods from the river banks all the way out. Some of that stuff goes a mile wide. And he figured out it's only 2 billion people get bled to death to fill the River Jordan. That blood goes out into the Mediterranean. From there, it goes out into the sea. And the evil ones have already told us that is what they are going to do to give new life. New life? New life for whom? For what? Are they feeding some alligators or crocodiles at the bottom of the ocean? They feeding some giants that have got to take bodies on again once again? Or what are they talking about? This is part 2 for September 30th, 2025. I'm known as Dr. John Taylor Kent. I am a servant. I'm serving you and I'm serving Yahweh. And I do my best to let my older brother point the way. Yeshua, the Messiah, told us so much. There's so much wealth there to be mined, to be not just gleaned, but mined for real wealth. Do me a favor, buy one of my Bibles and read it. Find other people who are reading Bibles as well and gather with them and talk about what you're reading in the Bible. There, you're going to feel so alive, so refreshed. At least I do. And once in a while I meet somebody who just leaves me with my jaw dropping for 2.5 hours. And I'm like going, man, now I understand what I do to other people, But that guy, I don't know if he's still alive. I'm going to go, hopefully I'm going to see him again. I don't have any hair at all. I shave it off, and I think he's turned white since then. So the greatest wealth is that talking you can have. The Holy Spirit, Yeshua the Messiah, is there.